The celebrations of Christmas and Epiphany always involve lights. Every year, I am wide-eyed with excitement on Thanksgiving weekend, and sometimes even sooner, when festive lights begin to appear all throughout the city. I am endlessly grateful for those who decorate their yards and the exterior of their homes with such luminous beauty. I love it. Sometimes the lights are a rainbow of colors. Sometimes they are simply and brightly white. And either way, it feels like these folks have given me a very special personal gift. And I always say, thank you. It is hard for us in 2014 to appreciate what light and darkness really meant in the ancient world. We can't even imagine a time when you couldn't only not string lights on a tree, but couldn't illumine anything without fire. Most people in the world couldn't afford candles until around the year 1800. And so that meant at nightfall, the darkness was absolute. And the fear of darkness is pretty much hardwired into all of us. Darkness feels dangerous, frightening, disconcerting. Marcus Borg has written some interesting words about darkness. He says, "We easily get lost in the dark. We stumble around and cannot find our way. We do not know what might be going on. Danger may lurk, spirits may roam, evil may be afoot." And to make it even worse, darkness and grief seem to go together like a hand in a glove. St. John of the Cross, for example, talks about the dark night of the soul. And John Dominic Crossan says, fear of night evokes the other primal fear, fear of death. It's no wonder then that light and fire came to be understood as something that came from the gods. From the moment Prometheus first shared the secret of fire with humans, we have intuitively known there is something holy about light. From the time when the Romans celebrated the feast of the unvanquished sun on December 25th, we have celebrated it. And from the very first verses in Genesis, when God says, "Let there be light," to the last verses in the book of Revelation in which Jesus is described as the bright morning star, Scripture has confirmed it. There is something holy about light. One writer has said, no wonder glory, which means radiance, luminosity, is seen as a central quality of the sacred. Now, hear the word of the Lord as recorded in Isaiah chapter 60, verse 1. The 60th chapter of the book of Isaiah, verse 1. And whether you do so physically or spiritually, I will invite you to stand and receive the word of the Lord, the prophetic promise found in Isaiah chapter 60, verse 1. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has risen upon you. Did you hear it? Did you receive it? Will you hear and receive the word of the Lord this morning? Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has risen upon you. We read this and we immediately think, Jesus. The glory of the Lord is rising. The glory of the Lord is being revealed. We think of the coming of the kings to recognize the brightness. We think of the Magi following the star to find Messiah. And of course, all of that is true. But this passage, in its original context, meant so much more. This part of Isaiah is speaking to the Jews who have returned home from their Babylonian exile. For nearly 50 years, the Jews had been banned from their homeland, and even their temple had been destroyed. When Persia conquered Babylon and the Persian king gave the Jews permission to go home, there was incredible joy. Can you even imagine the anticipation? They imagined what it would be like to go home, to see the places that were only dimly remembered, but which had been built up in their hearts and in their heads to epic proportions. And so they returned. But what they found broke their hearts. The original splendid temple of Solomon was gone, and in its place was something that felt more like a roadside shrine. Their sacred places were gone. Their homes were gone. Jerusalem was still mostly a pile of rubble. The monarchy, the throne of David, once regal and proud, was reduced to a tiny community under the thumb of a powerful empire. And what was left of that community was divided, unable to choose a single way forward. And so sadly, with tremendous disappointment, they learned that aspects of their past were unrecoverable, irreplaceable, and they were devastated. Their hearts were broken. These are the people to whom Isaiah is speaking. But I tell you today that I believe this heartbreak, this vast disillusionment and disappointment, this sense that the world has vastly changed and that we are somehow lost in the debris, is still relevant today. It still preaches. It speaks to us. Because both the national and world news leave us with a sense of displacement, a kind of exile in place. Thinking back on this past year, we didn't even make it through the first month of 2013 without escaping tragedy in the world. The nightclub fire in Brazil was the second most devastating fire in that country's history, killing hundreds of people and injuring hundreds more. And how well I remember April 15th, not because it's tax day, but 2 pressure cookers exploded near the finish line of the Boston Marathon, killing 3 people and injuring more than 260 others, and putting the entire nation of America on edge. Having moved back to Atlanta, my native homeland, from Oklahoma, which I also loved, I vividly recall May 20th when a tornado barreled through Moore, Oklahoma, only 11 miles from where I lived for 3 years. The storm flattened homes, whipped cars into the air, and collapsed an elementary school to rubble. And by the time it had ended, 24 people were dead, including 9 little children. On September 16th, which is my birthday, a lone gunman, did y'all write that down? A lone gunman fatally shot 12 people and injured 3 others in a mass shooting at the Washington Navy Yard in D.C., the second deadliest mass murder to ever take place on a U.S. military base. Only 5 days later, news coverage focused on the Westgate shopping mall attack in Kenya, that lasted for 3 horrible days, terrorizing hundreds and resulting in 27 deaths, with over 200 more people wounded in that mass shooting. Then our own nation faced a 17-day government shutdown in October, sending panic everywhere. And then it was back to another world news event in November as the deadliest tropical cyclone to ever impact the Philippines wreaked havoc and is still on that country. This became the strongest landfalling cyclone ever recorded, killing thousands and displacing over 4 million people. That's more than the number of those displaced by Hurricane Katrina and the Indian Ocean tsunami combined. The number of people displaced is the equivalent to the population of some entire countries. Yes, both the national and world news leave one with a sense of displacement, a kind of exile in place. And what about our own personal life events? Disease, deaths, difficulties. Many in our congregation know all about that. And I wouldn't even want to tell you what my night last night was like and how terrified I am. But as Anne Weems reminds us in her poem, Kneeling in Bethlehem, into this silent night as we make our weary way we know not where, just when the night becomes its darkest and we cannot see our path, just then is when the angels rush in, their hands full of stars. Friends, into our darkest night, in the person of Jesus Christ, God comes and brings light. The words of Isaiah speak to us today, just as they spoke to the ancient community of exiled and relocated Jews. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has risen upon you. For darkness shall cover the earth, and thick darkness the peoples. But the Lord will arise upon you, and his glory will appear over you. For post-exilic Jews, this passage was a reiteration of the same promise God had been making since he uprooted Abraham and Sarah out of their retirement community and put them on the road saying, I will bless you, which translates roughly, I will be with you. If you get right down to it, this is the story behind Christmas to begin with. Emmanuel, God with you, God who will bless you. In her book, The Greatest Gift, Ann Voskamp says that I will bless you is the gift that wraps up all stresses quiet. Man, do I need that right now, do you? I will bless you, says the God who comes to where you are, she writes, who comes in the heaviness of the day to the space where the weight hangs on the edges of you. So you just keep holding your breath. So you just keep forgetting to breathe. But the weight of everything melts like thinning snow in the heat of his words, I will bless you. He will not burden you. He will not break you. He will bless you. The God of invincible reality, the God who has infinite resources, the God who is insistent love. You can always go ahead and breathe. He will bless. You can always breathe when you know that all is grace. Voskamp says that the personal blessings envelop you first, and then you are the blessing sent out into the world. But here it is. You will be experienced as a blessing to the extent that you have first experienced yourself as blessed. In other words, you must feel viscerally, emotionally, spiritually, the fullness of your own pitcher before trusting the pouring of yourself. God told Abraham to leave Ur, promising his blessing. And so Abraham and his wife Sarah got up and went in faith, believing. And so D.L. Moody says faith is the gift of God. So is the air, but you have to breathe it. So is bread, but you have to eat it. So is water, but you have to drink it. And so Voskamp challenges God's postmodern people, and she says, so breathe it, eat it, drink it, leave the blur of Ur, and taste the promised land of his coming. Only when you first unwrap the blessings that are given to you can you then be wrapped up as a gift of blessing to others. Friends, in looking back over the news events of 2013, we have already established that both the national and world news, as well as our own personal life events, can leave us with a sense of displacement, a kind of exile in place. This world has become increasingly darkened and disorderly by the effects of sin. Has anybody noticed? It's easy to lose your way in the dark. It's easy to be overtaken by the shadows. And so today, as we celebrate the season of Epiphany, we deliberately this morning focus on light. I love and appreciate art, and one of my favorite artists for many years was the popular artist Thomas Kinkade. He was known as the painter of light. Sadly, he died on Good Friday in 2012 at age 54. This painter of light, as he was called, used a style of painting to what is known as the Luminism school, an approach to art that's characterized by painting in such a way that the natural reflection of light is brought out in the paint. His works appear to emit an otherworldly glow, which he gave testimony to being evoked by the light of the world, Jesus Christ. Thousands of people over the years gave testimony as to how his paintings led them into a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ, or how this particular painting prevented me from committing suicide. The light in this painting that we bought restored our marriage. Or this particular painting was a catalyst for revitalizing my own spiritual journey. You see, Kinkade at one time was a dynamic, powerful believer who used his testimony as that of the light of the world, Jesus Christ, who brings light into the darkness. But somehow, Kinkade, the painter of light, lost his way. He got lost in the shadows until that light was ultimately extinguished. And his premature death at age 54 was due to acute intoxication from Valium and alcohol. His last hours on earth were spent on an all-night drinking binge. It's so sad and so tragic. And his story, I believe, offers a poignant reminder for Epiphany. The painter of light offers a lesson for this season of light, this time in the church when we as believers celebrate God's gift of light to the world in the person of Jesus Christ. You see, Kincaid, for whatever reason we do not know, moved from the light into a world of shadows and darkness. And once he entered the shadows, his life started spinning out of control, and he was quickly overtaken by the darkness. It could happen to you. It could happen to me. There, but by the grace of God, that could happen to any one of us, no matter how firmly anchored in the light we may think ourselves to be. Small steps and small actions, seemingly innocuous, can subtly introduce shadows, and shadows can block the light. But in the person of Jesus Christ, God acts repeatedly to expose the shadows and the darkness for the emptiness that they really are. And so there is another story, unlike Kincaid's. In the prelude to the 1996 Summer Olympics, and I was there, runners carried the Olympic torch across the United States to our beloved Atlanta. Several times during the run, the torch went out. The first time was on a foggy day when two cyclists were carrying the torch across a drawbridge, and a steel joint in the bridge punctured one of the bicycle tires, causing the cyclist to drop the torch. The flame was extinguished. Although this was probably an embarrassing moment for the cyclist, I know it would be for me, a mother torch was kept in one of the support vans. And so the cyclist relit the torch he carried from the mother torch. And then he repaired the flat and resumed the ride. I believe today that relighting the torch is an appropriate metaphor for our spiritual journey during Epiphany. And so we have the opportunity this morning to allow God to re-illuminate our path and our journey. The Georgia Division has designated that this first Sunday in the new year be observed as a commitment service. What a great time for us to renew our soldiers' covenant. And so as Marty comes and as we enter this morning into a time of commitment, we as a community of believers proclaim with the prophet Isaiah, the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of the shadow of death, a light has dawned, and his name is Jesus, the Messiah. He has come, and he shines over you. God himself speaks into the darkness, telling us to arise and shine, for Jesus, the light of the world, has come. And the same Jesus who has come to us has now called us to shine as bright lights that will illumine this dark world so that his glory will appear over it. And so this morning, I invite you to the place of prayer and renewal. As sons and daughters of Abraham, come this morning in faith, believing that God will bless us, that he will be with us. And so together as a community of faith, we leave the figurative place of Babylonia, the place that would hold us fearful and captive. And by faith, we leave this morning the blur of Ur. And together we breathe and we eat and we drink faith on this Sunday of Epiphany. We unwrap the gifts of his blessings to us so that we can then be wrapped as blessings and gifts to others. For when the blessing of God's presence becomes the gift we receive and then give, Atlanta Temple becomes a type of promised land. So on this first Sunday of the new year, as we celebrate the feast of Epiphany, come. Soldiers' Covenant renewal cards can be found at the end of the mercy seat in baskets. You see votive candles placed at 3 stations. And so you have the opportunity today to re-illuminate, reignite your torch from the Master's torch as you light a votive candle as a symbol of your renewal, your rededication, your commitment. Receive the blessing of God's presence today. And then commit that you will go out and you will give it. So come, receive the light. And then commit today that you will go and shine as a bright beam in a dark world, leading people to Jesus, who is the light of the world. I speak over you this morning, and I speak into you this morning the words of a 5th century Irish monk who prayed, "Be thou a bright flame before me. Be thou a kindly shepherd behind me. Today, tonight, and forever. Thanks be to God." Amen. May his light truly shine on you this day. And may you re-illuminate his light so that it will shine brighter through you. The world is lost. The world is dark. And we are the candle of the Lord.